All right, then here we have Vari McCann. All right, so Vari is going to be talking to us about increasing our impact, achieving your vision through outside-the-box thinking. Vari is Youth STEM 2030's founder and CEO. Based in Scotland, she has a strong belief in the positive difference young people can make to our world through STEM. Vari was named one of the UK's top 50 women in sustainability in 2020 and is currently part of the steering group of SDG Network Scotland. When she's not creating STEM opportunities for young people, she can usually be found volunteering. Right over to you, Vari.
Thanks so much, Maha, and both to you and Bupi for facilitating this stream today. And for everybody in the chat, I've loved seeing your answers so far to those questions. Those are great. Today, I think I really want to talk about what, to me, it means to be both a leader, but also to increase your impact as a leader. I'm going to say the caveat now that you'll understand once I get to the end why I'm saying it, but this is not necessarily what I say now shouldn't be what I say if you ask me the same question in a year's time. That's, I guess, the point that I'm going to get at. So to give you a bit of a story of, like, I was out walking my dog before this, and I was thinking about this. I was thinking, what am I going to tell all these young people that want to be a leader? Because there was never a point really where I thought, oh, a leader is something that I am. It just kind of happened. And thinking about kind of growing up, I never really saw myself as a leader. And I guess looking back, I just was somebody that got stuff done. It was really as simple as that. So whether it was organising stuff at school, whether it was just being the person that would, like, you know, say, right, we're gonna do this assembly or we're gonna do this event, and then just making it happen. But I never really, you know, it was never in a particular position of leadership. It was never particularly something that I thought, oh yeah, I want to lead. Or, you know, sometimes people think that leading is about being in charge, but I never thought of it that way. And then kind of as I went into my last couple of years of school, there was an opportunity that came up called Young Enterprise, and it's around the world. It's known as JA in a lot of the world. And it's a program where young people can kind of do, like, basically set up a business while they're at school. And I actually nearly didn't do it. So you do it as a team. And I kind of thought, am I just saying that I kind of am interested in this because that I kind of get involved in stuff, or am I actually interested in this? And I really wasn't sure, like, whether it was something that was for people like me, because I didn't consider myself as an entrepreneur, and I definitely didn't consider myself as somebody that would run a business, yet somehow here we are now. But at that point, it really wasn't something that I thought was what people like me did. And so it was actually one of my teachers that was like, no, come along, give it a go. So I went along at the first couple of meetings, and I wasn't the leader of the group. I was just there, and I was trying to organise things as I did generally. I wasn't the group's managing director. I didn't have a role of leadership. I could see that the group was a bit disjointed though, because we were there, but nobody, like, could agree on times to be there. So it was something as simple as literally sending everybody a bit of paper that said lunchtime, after school, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and getting everybody to fill it in. And all of a sudden, Friday after school was the day. And some people hated that that was the day, but that was the day that worked for everybody. Nobody wants to get their weekends starting a whole hour later. But that was the day that worked. So that was the day that we met. And, you know, for the first 3 months that we did it, other people were the leader. And I think looking back on it, I can see that we didn't really put a lot of thought into who did what. It was just kind of, oh yeah, I'll do that, like, because I have, like, a kind of a vague interest in it or whatever. But somebody else was the leader, and it wasn't that they were a bad leader. They were just a very busy person, because they also had other leadership responsibilities within the school. And so then we then had a second managing director who then realised actually this wasn't what they wanted to spend their time doing, being the leader. They wanted to be part of the group, but they didn't want to be part of the leader, and that's okay, because there's some situations where you don't want to be the leader, or you shouldn't want to be the leader, because somebody else might be the better leader in that situation. It doesn't mean that they're, it's not a competition of who's the best leader generally, but it might be that they're the best person for that particular role at that particular time. So it was actually then somebody from the local area board that then came along, because by that point our group had 2 managing directors, we had no product, and it was like, I don't know, it was about 3 weeks until we had to take the non-existent product to be able to sell it at our first event. And we didn't have anything. Like, we literally had nothing. We couldn't agree on the product. There was kind of 2 camps within the group, and those kind of coincided with the friendship groups within the group as well. And there was kind of a lot of disagreement on that. And he came along to the meeting, and I don't know, I just kind of said what I thought. And he was like, "Why are you not the managing director?" I'm like, "Why would it be the managing director? Like, why would it be me?" He's like, "Well, you seem to have a lot to say, and you seem to know what you're talking about. So you don't have one now. So why don't you do it?" And I was kind of like, well, if the group are going to get behind me as it, then yeah, because that's really important, that as a leader, that your team gets behind you. It's not necessarily the case that they'll always agree with every decision you make. It's not always the case that every decision you make will be popular, but you know that you've done a half decent job when you see the team organically get behind you to make something happen, whatever that is. So I kind of excitedly, but kind of half surprisedly, took on the role. And we did actually go on to 3 weeks later have a product. And then by the end of the year, we'd won the local area finals and went to represent the local area at the Scottish finals. And there was tons that I could have done better. Like, I'm not saying this to all be like, "Oh, look at what I've done and look at how amazing I was." But it was the lessons that it taught me, because that was the first time that I had to work with people, in the sense of I need to maintain a long-term relationship with these people to be able to actually get the best out of them, to get the best for the team. And sometimes that meant that you have to take things on that you have no clue what to do. Team member came the night before our accounts had to go into our business report. I've not been able to do the accounts. I had to learn how to do accounts very quickly that night, so sometimes it's about then doing things that you don't have a clue what you're doing, but like, if it's not on you, who is it on? But going back to what Bupi and Maha had said before as well, about Lynn looking after yourself as well, that's really important. I can't say that I do that perfectly. Certainly this week it's not been perfect, given that this is the biggest event that we have of the year. But we'll definitely be having a good rest after this, I think. But I guess the point that I'm saying is that at that point, even at that end of the year, I still didn't really see myself as being somebody that was a leader. But looking back on it, I can see that that particular experience was super pivotal to then what I'm doing now, and not just and not even so much in the kind of business skill sense. It was actually more so in the working with people sense. Being a leader means that you need to take difficult decisions. It means you need to have difficult conversations. It often gets romanticized as being, "Oh, you're the person that like gets the photo taken in this opportunity, or you get to do this cool thing." And that's part of it sometimes. Sometimes you do get to do cool things, and sometimes you get the absolute joy of giving those away to somebody else so that they can do the cool thing. That's one of like genuinely one of the best things, being able to say, "Hey, do you want to do this thing? Because we've had this opportunity and you'd be so much better at it than me." Like, and so then if you ask me then what does it mean to be a leader, I think that a lot of it's to do with knowing the people you work with, knowing who's better at things than you, I'm not really that like skilled at anything relative to the members of my team. Like, I'm a generalist, I've realised, but that's kind of my job. It's not my job to be the best person at editing an article or the best person at running the tech of an event like this. It's my job to know who those people are and put them in those roles where they can thrive and they can take ownership of that. Because I've certainly found in the past when I have, you know, if you've got myself and somebody else and I know more than they do about a particular topic, then it's really easy for you to then have to do it all yourself. And I'm definitely not perfect at always realising this. Like, there's times where all the time I'm like, yeah, they should have done that. They would have been better at doing that than me. And it's about knowing then how to then get the best out of your team from that. Because I think that kind of, it's a bit like your team is somewhat of a reflection of, it's your job to have the vision for the team. It's not your job to do all the doing. And I think that I love analogies, right? And there's this analogy that we use when people are joining one of our opportunities, Youth STEM Matters, and it's a bit about an orchestra. You know, in an orchestra, you've got the conductor, you've got all the different people playing all different instruments. The conductor doesn't run about playing the trombone and then hitting the triangle and then having a wee go at the violin. The conductor's job is to bring everybody together, to be the person that has the vision for the music that then allows the people that are better at playing that particular instrument than them to absolutely thrive, and to be the kind of glue that holds everybody together. Because if the violins are cooperating with the trombones, then you're kind of in trouble. So I guess that's kind of partly how I see it. There's definitely not so good things about being a leader. It's very easy to try and take on too much yourself. Again, that is one of the things that I am awful at. It is one of, I think there's also a big thing about you do sometimes end up in difficult situations. You have to be able to like be the person that if all else fails, it's on you. Like, you know, if a speaker doesn't turn up today, then you're on the stage. Like, if nobody else will do it, it has to be you. And there's some things that are going to be so far out of your comfort zone that you're like, no, it needs to be somebody else that does that. But there's also going to be some things where it's like they're a bit outside your comfort zone and you just have to get on with that, because I think that is where you grow. And I think that, going back to my earlier point from the beginning, how you increase your impact as a leader is by growing as a person. And I say that with lots of conviction, but it's only something that I've started to kind of realise in the past literally 6 weeks. And I think that it's one of those things that amongst all of the things that you're doing, all the organising that you're doing, whether that's that you're organising a campaign, whether it's that you're running a non-profit, whether it's just that you're creating an assembly at school, it doesn't matter what the scale is. Amongst all the doing, you can sometimes get caught up in that and forget that actually, if you're not growing, you can become the thing that's inhibiting the thing from growing. And that's a kind of harsh reality when you realise it, when it hits you. You're like, it's me that's holding this back, because it's easy to then blame yourself, but also you need to realise that you've realised it now. So now you just need to get on and make it the best that you can now that you know that. You can't, if you don't know something, you don't know it. And sometimes it takes you being told it or realising it several times before you actually then are able to implement that in your life. So I guess that kind of, that idea of growth is why I said at the start that the caveat to this whole everything that I'm saying is that if I come back and told you the exact same thing in a year's time, I've not grown enough. So that's why I said that, because yes, this is what I think now, but it's something that like actively I feel like my views will change, because that's kind of that's one of the results of growing. And so to do that growing, it's uncomfortable. It's really uncomfortable. But that's the point. So yeah, I think that that's kind of, I'll wrap up there, and I'm happy to kind of answer any questions that either Maha, Bupi, or anybody at all in the audience has. And yeah, I'm happy to kind of answer anything that you might want to know.
That has been honestly impressive, Vari. Honestly, I'm speechless, to be honest. And I think we have our first question already. It is by Erica. What would you say has been your greatest accomplishment? We know we've listed so much by you, but what has been the most greatest of yours that you think is yours?
Probably having the guts to set up Youth STEM 2030 to start, because starting is so hard. Like starting something, anything, whether it's that you're starting going to Scouts, whether it's that you're starting a social enterprise, whether it's that you're going to start singing lessons. I don't sing. I'm not starting singing lessons anytime soon for anybody watching, but you know, it doesn't matter what it is. Starting can be really hard. It can be the terrifying step. So I think that probably, and I think that part of that comes back to kind of realizing that like the kind of traditional route wasn't going to be the one that, even though for so many years I thought it was, realizing that that wasn't the one that would be the one that I wanted to go down, or that would be best for me to go down. And that wasn't an overnight realization. That was a very long time, and I'm talking several years. I mean, I'm 22 now, so I left school 3 and a bit years ago. And you know, that takes time to realize some things like that sometimes. But I think kind of those two went hand in hand, having like realizing that and kind of then having the guts to start it. Because if we didn't, then we wouldn't be here now. So, you know, the rest, it doesn't matter. And, you know, I mean, I won't go full cheesy mode and say like, I mean, what the thing that brings me genuinely on a kind of weekly basis, the joy is seeing young people doing amazing things. And if we've had a small influence in that, then, you know, I know that what we're doing is worthwhile. So, you know, that's like the kind of micro accomplishments that come along the way, but that's their accomplishment. We just help them along the way a little bit. That's not my accomplishment, but that's the bit that gives me the kind of ongoing sense of, yeah, we're doing a good thing here.
Wonderful. We have a lot of questions pouring down in the chat box. So one of the primary ones is, what have been your biggest inspiration? So who's your biggest inspiration along the way?
Oh,
tough. Yes.
Yeah, it is, because it's like there's nobody that I have like a poster of, like, that I look at every day and think, oh yeah, they're my inspiration. Again, this is like really, really cliche, but I think seeing other young people doing amazing things, because for so long I didn't realise that I could. It wasn't until I was like around 17 that I realised that young people could actually make change, because until that point I just thought you go to school, you go home, you do your homework, and you grow older, and then you get a job maybe, or you go and continue studying or whatever, and then maybe then you've got half a chance of making a difference. So I think that it is seeing other young people being able to make a difference, because yeah, they're so awesome.
Agreed. Seeing you, I do think people are awesome now. Younger people have so much potential. I'm so glad you shed some light on it. And yeah, I think we have one more. Do you have an advice for overcoming imposter syndrome as a leader?
Again, such a good question. And it's like, it's one of these things that I don't feel I have, like, because genuinely every day I doubt like my capability to do stuff. Especially the things that I know I'm rubbish at, and I feel like there's some things that I'm quite good at, and there's some things that I'm really bad at. I don't really have like an in between. So I think that like with that then comes a lot of sense of like not feeling like I'm good enough to do what I'm doing. So like, you know, this doing something like this just now doesn't bother me at all, because I would rather speak to lots of people. But if you put me in a room with 2 people and said, right, on you go, we're having a networking event, I would be totally out of my comfort zone doing that. So I think that in terms of the imposter syndrome, the funny thing is that about a year and a half ago, this is a question that I asked at an event of a speaker, and they gave me a better answer than what I can give just now. So I'm going to share their answer. And they said that if you feel imposter syndrome, it means that you're in a room of people that are smarter than you in one way or another. You know, smartness, or whatever you want to call it, is not a linear scale. Everybody's good at different things in different ways. But it means that you're in a room of people that know something more than you about something. And when you're in that room, you feel the imposter syndrome because you don't feel good enough. And because that you're in that room, that means that that's when you're going to grow. And that's exactly where you should be, because that then if you were in a room where you felt totally comfortable, you'll be stuck in that room for a very long time. So that was their answer, which I can take no credit for whatsoever. But I think helped me to think of it in a different way. So, well, I wouldn't say that I've overcame it. I think that reminding myself of that helps a little. So hopefully it'll help you as well, who's asked the question.
Of course. I think people are so impressed by how well of a speaker you are. And not just that, every hurdle you've gone through is not only your inspiration or your, good foundation. I think it's everyone's now. So inspiring. And I think we do have a lot more actually. Who is part of your support system? Again, a pretty hard one.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. It's like nobody exists in isolation. And I think that sometimes, especially when you're a leader, you become like the thing that people associate with that thing. So you think about the climate movement and you think of people like Greta Thunberg or Vanessa Nataki, and you think of those people who are seen as the leaders, but like they don't exist in isolation in the same way. I don't. So I would say my dog is definitely part of my support system. He's like my best friend. And so he's like one of the ways that like I make sure that I don't spend my entire life working. So I love taking him to the beach and in the forest. And my mum and dad as well. And yeah, I would say I have a fairly small circle generally. But like I think also people that I work with within Youth STEM 2030, it's something that like if you'd asked me 2 years ago, like, are you going to like there's something that one of the volunteers says, Poppy, not Poppy from the design team, different Poppy. She says that the people that she works with in Youth STEM Matters or Journal are like the friends that she's never met. And I never thought that I would think that about some of the people that I do work with, but it kind of is. And so, yeah, I think the other people that I get to work with here are also like solid people, awesome people. And yeah, I think, yeah, that's probably my answer to that one.
Wisely said. And I kind of do agree. Yeah. Right. So moving on to the next question. What can I do as a leader if my team members are not supportive? Now, that really brings us back to the leadership aspect, back to track. So what do you think, Vari?
Yeah, I think that with that one, there's a distinction to be made. Are they not supportive of a particular decision you've made? So is it about the thing that you've done, you've decided, or are they not supportive of you as an individual? Because those are two completely different things that can be hard to separate. If it's a particular decision that you've made, I think it's helpful generally when people don't like a decision or disagree with the decision or don't support the decision, to think about why them. Did you think about that before you made it? Maybe you did. Maybe you realised that you had a shortcoming there. And also to think about, why, how would it be in kind of their shoes? It doesn't always mean that you can change the decision, because sometimes you might have more bits of the puzzle than they might they might see it through how it impacts their particular part of the organisation or the project. But if you're trying to balance something else, then you might not be able to agree with them, even if you would like to had that other thing that you're trying to balance not existed. If it's that they're not supportive of you as a person, get out of there. And that sounds radical, but genuinely it's not worth staying somewhere where you don't feel that the people are not like supportive of you or supportive of like it doesn't mean you need to agree with everything, but if you're in a place where you're like, I don't like the people I work with, I don't trust people I work with, I don't think they trust me, you need to get out of there, because there's plenty of other people in the world. And I know it doesn't feel like that at the time, because I've been in those situations where it's not a nice place to be, but you don't realise that there's anywhere else you could go. And you're kind of like, you just have to stay here, I guess, because that what you have is better than nothing, you feel at the time. But like when I was previously in one of those situations deciding whether or not to leave an organisation, that was the case, and where I didn't agree with a lot with what was going on. Again, I can't take credit for this. This was somebody else that said that told me this, but hopefully it'll help you as well. Is that you want to be in a place where the thing you do challenges you, not where the people challenge you. If you're in a place where the people that you work with challenge you, get out. If you're in a place where you enjoy the people, but you find the thing challenging, then that's a good thing. So that would be my advice for that one.
Interesting. Honestly, one thing that we all tend to do is that we lack, go away when we think that we don't have anywhere else to go, that we just hang on to the group of people we are in, and we don't even see the negative impact that has on us, kind of like dragging us down. That is honestly a very strong message, Vari. I think we have a few more questions popping in and out. Whoa, you're a super real model. What are your tips for helping friends to try leading if they want to but are too nervous?
Yeah, and I think that's one of those things that it's like there's a kind of, it's a bit of a balancing act, because you don't want to push someone so far that they're so uncomfortable that failure's inevitable at some points, but you don't want it to crash and burn. Equally, if they never have any sort of push, then they won't grow. I think that in that situation, it's really helpful to ask them what they want in terms of if they want you to push them, because if you're trying to then maintain you've got to think about the context, about the people, you know these people. If you're then trying to maintain a friendship while also trying to work on a project and trying to be the person that pushes them, they might not want that from you. They might want it generally, but there's a difference between them wanting it and feeling like you're the person to give them it. And that's not personal. That's just friends they might have it that friends is friends and this other thing's this other thing, and that's okay. I think in that case, it would kind of be being the supportive person. Doesn't mean you need to agree with everything they say. If you do find yourself in a situation where people are agreeing with everything you say, that's also bad, because it means that you've built a group of yes people, which is not conducive to them moving forward in new, different, exciting ways. But if they want to try leading and you're being a supportive friend, I think that giving them feedback if they ask for it, or saying that you would offer it if they wanted it. Again, you're trying to maintain your friendship. I mean, don't quote me on the negotiations of a friendship, particularly. I wouldn't call that my area of expertise, but like, I think that being the supportive friend first is probably helpful. And I think that it is a kind of tricky one, because if you're trying to be more than one thing to somebody, it's whether that you want that relationship to be different. So I think that, yeah, encouraging as a supportive friend is important. But yeah, and I think that if there's something that you can do that's in your skill set that you can practically help with, then that's great. If it might just be that, if they're going to, for example, speak at a summit like this, it might be that they want somebody to be an audience of one so that they can practice. That might be all they need. It might be that they want some help deciding what to say. It might be something else. So I think that, yeah, asking them is probably a good shout, because everybody would want probably that situation handled differently.
I honestly don't think I could have said it any better. Go ahead, Bupe.
Yeah, I was just saying that's really amazing, and I just love how, like, these are such practical leadership ideas that you've shared, and they're not just ideas, like, it's real life. I could resonate with, you know, some of the things you said, especially when you were talking about how, like, sometimes you have to look at yourself as a leader and realize that you might be what's standing between the growth of the organization or the group or the team. And those are some difficult conversations to have, like, within yourself, because you have to be very, like, honest and truthful. I know I've had my fair share of those conversations. So I just wanted to find out from you, how do you practice empathy and compassion when you're being, like, you know, brutally honest to that kind of extent? How do you maintain that empathy and compassion towards yourself?
Excellent question. And it's an interesting one as well, because it's funny because until just after doing the summit last year, empathy wasn't really a word that was in my kind of, you know, what are you as a leader? It was kind of very low on the list, I felt. And it wasn't actually until I was asking last year's design team, what about this was good? What about this could have been better? And some of them said about, like, they said about specifically about me having an empathetic leadership style. And I was kind of like, really? Like, I'm not a horrible person, but, like, I didn't think that people would say that. And so I think that part of it comes to looking after people first. Like, there is literally no point in pushing for something to happen if you're not looking after the people. And that is the kind of converse to what society tells us we should be doing, especially nowadays when you're seeing what everybody else is doing on social media, when you're seeing how great everybody else is doing, when you're seeing that they're meeting all these milestones, doing all these things, and you're like feeling that you're not doing enough. But then if you then push your team so hard to the point that then they can't, like, do any more, then you will pay the consequences for that in the long run. So I think looking after the people first would be part of my advice on that one, I think. And I think generally, like, I think being a human first, like, it probably sounds ridiculous, but, like, you know, you often get to hear bits about people's lives when it's not the greatest. And I think that's, to me, it's partly half a measure of, like, it's not my absolute measurement of how I'm doing. Obviously, I don't want anybody to be having a hard time, but it is inevitable that at points people will be. But the fact that they can then tell you that they're having a hard time, be honest about that, to me, kind of shows that, like, they feel, like, safe enough to say that to you, because they don't have to tell you the ins and outs of their life. And if they don't want to, that's fine. That's up to them. But I think that kind of responding to them as a human first, before as like anything else, before the person that asks them, have they done that task? At a more kind of like micro level on a day-to-day in terms of like giving feedback and things like that. This is a conversation that I actually had recently with one of our volunteers, and they were like, I don't know how to give feedback that feels harsh when I have to say something constructive. I want to say it in a constructive way. And they weren't not saying it constructively, but I said, and because they said they didn't want people to feel it was unfair what I was saying. I said, well, if you can explain why, then it's probably justified feedback. If you can show them how to do it differently, it's probably justified feedback. But also consider the converse. If you don't give that a fair set of feedback, you're not doing that person a disservice. You're giving the other person that's actually done a really good job the disservice. Because if you're telling everybody that they're doing great even when they're not, the people who are like absolutely really working hard, really giving their best, are then getting the disservice of you saying to people who might not be giving their best that they're doing well. And that's really difficult, because there's 101 reasons, especially within young people's lives, when it's such a time of transition where there's so much that could be going in somebody's life. And to me, that kind of trumps all. If something is going on, then like what you're doing here is probably less important than what that life event is. So we deal with that first, and then you come back here when you're ready. Do you know what I mean? So it's having the thought to say, actually, we're not the most important, and also being able to say we're not the most important thing in young people's lives. Like, we might be for some young people, we're a big part of their lives. For some, it's a less big part, but this is not their main focus. It might be my main focus, but it's not theirs. And so leaving room to kind of acknowledge that we're not their everything. We're actually a very small proportion of their life if you take it with everything else that's going on in their life. So I think kind of remaining grounded enough to remember that helps when you're thinking about being empathetic.
Fantastic. Honestly, it is mind-blowing. Thank you so much, Vari, for joining us today. It's been a wonderful session with you.
No problem at all. It's been lovely to speak to everyone, and thank you all so much for your questions. They were such good questions as well. They were all super thoughtful and unique. So thank you all, and I will leave you over with Maha and Bupi, who I think are going to do some activities, or they might give you a wee break first if they've got the time for that in their schedule. But yeah, thank you everybody for joining, and I will see you all hopefully later on when we're back at Summit. Thanks everyone.
So very much.
Thank you so much
again.